of course you would treat everybody individually. And of course you would try and get down to the root issue. And it just seemed like common sense. Like, it just kind of hit me so squarely that it really pulled me through a lot of the other distractions in life that, oh no, I need to follow that idea. And some of these core tenets of the philosophy of Chinese medicine is balance, keeping the body in harmony. And certainly there's many, many ways to do that. But I also remember reading early on how the emotions were stored and reflected through the organ systems.
Welcome to Personalized by Vitamin Lab, the show where we dive deep into the world of personalization in healthcare. I'm your host, Dr. David Dizer. Please remember that the following discussion is for educational purposes only, and it's not intended to diagnose or treat any disease. Speak with your healthcare practitioner first before integrating anything that you learned today. Join us as we explore the remarkable stories, breakthroughs, and possibilities that come with the pursuit of personalized healthcare. Welcome back to Personalized by Vitamin Lab. I'm your host, Dr. David Dizer. Today on the show, we're talking with Dr. Kevin Preston, a traditional Chinese medicine doctor who's redefining what health and healing can look like. Known for his transformational retreats, group-based healing work, and powerful detox and optimization protocols, Dr. Preston blends ancient Eastern practices with modern investigative tools to help people unlock deep, lasting vitality. With over 15 years of clinical experience, he's guided thousands through chronic illness, mystery syndromes, and energetic imbalances, focusing not just on symptoms, but on restoring connection in the body, mind, and spirit. Get ready to explore a new frontier of healing with our episode with Dr. Kevin Preston. Welcome back to Personalized. Today I'm here with Dr. Kevin Preston. Good to see you, sir.
Thank you for having me. Good to see you too.
Oh, I'm so excited to talk to you because I've just been absolutely lost in your social media for hours because it is so engaging. It's like you're living the practitioner's dream life. You've created this kind of situation in the wilderness that is so my vibe. Can you tell me about your current situation in the wilderness?
Gosh, I think nature is medicine, and even the Chinese medicine teachings of the body is like a garden. And I think if we're like gardens and we have all this organic material in our biome and everything else, the more we can immerse ourselves in the natural environments around us, the better it is for us. And especially as a practitioner, I want to make sure I'm dialed in as much as possible. We're not perfect either. I got issues. I got stuff that comes up, and I do dedicate a lot of time to being as healthy as possible. And so I find the wilderness is this like anchor point in the best way possible, that all the different static and things we pick up as human beings, I get to have that lovingly, move through me, so I'm not carrying more than what I should. And then I can come into each session or treatment space or retreats in a clear way and still be human at the same time.
You need it. So many, like all my mentors and so many of the great naturopathic doctors have left the cities for the wilderness. And I so envy that. Tell me about what it's meant for your practice. I know. Well, first of all, have you always been in sort of outside of a city practicing?
Yeah, by and large, and there was a pretty good stint in the Lower Mainland, Vancouver area, Surrey, Langley, like the suburbs, and I felt good there. I would get myself into nature wherever possible, and at the same time, I'm a farm kid from Alberta, grew up in the the woods, rivers, forests, hunting, fishing, all of those things, and just spending a lot of time outside. And I think in that phase of going to Vancouver, going to school for Chinese medicine, commuting in traffic, and having a lot more people around than what I was used to, it was definitely a big initiation. It was a big shift in my life, and I adapted, as we do. But after about 10 years of practice, I could feel that deep stirring inside that I wanted to get back more to my roots, or a lifestyle that was more immersed in nature. And I love people, and I also love having solitude because it's a way that I recharge. And it just seemed like the congestion on the roads and everything else was more than what I felt like I needed to thrive. And this is something I coach practitioners on and patients is, finding the things that resonate with you. Because I have met people that love the concrete jungle and they thrive in the city and they would never want to be anywhere else. sometimes I question that. My own judgment is like, have you really been in nature?
Or
do you know what you're missing? And at the same time, we're all wired differently. We all share lots of similarities as a human species, and what each of us need to thrive might be slightly different. And for me, definitely having spaces where I can hike, mountain bike, go sit in the woods, big trees, by rivers, lakes, whatever it is, like whatever that part of it is for my soul is what I feel really drawn to. And so I tell people, like, go to the things that you feel drawn to or where you feel you're healthiest. And life tends to take on a different octave when you're doing that.
Definitely. Good for you for actually doing it. So often it's on the vision board or, in the journal, and you've actually done it. I feel like I use, full disclosure here, I use this show as like personal counseling, executive coaching. I'm 10 years in right now, and I feel like my wife and I are like, okay, wait a minute, we should be more connected. So we've been trying to sort out, the kind of the places around Vancouver, and we're lucky to have, these places, but the traffic really is picking up. It's quite intense to get around here at the moment. I'm really happy for you. I'm also a farm kid, but from Nova Scotia.
Okay.
And missing out a little bit about missing out on that a little bit. You have kids as well?
I do, and I think that was actually part of the consideration of when we left the Lower Mainland. They were 5 and 7, and so not super invested in their peer groups just yet. And I could feel that stirring in me, and it almost felt like the river current of life sometimes, that you can fight it or you can let it take you, and that was kind of the feeling at the time, as well as some of those logistical, logical pieces. It would be a good time to move just based on their age. And also I did want to try and have more of an upbringing for them that was less city-based and more nature-based, and quieter, smaller schools, and all of the above, because that's what I had felt was really effective for me. And super small town has its ups and downs as well. But the nature piece, I wanted that to be a non-negotiable in our lives, and just being able to access it without sitting in the car for an hour or two on either end to access the nature, and
pay for parking.
Yeah, pay for parking and suck in all
the beach now.
the carbon monoxide. And I'm like, it's time to make a shift. And so my kids have been such huge inspiration for me, and done a lot of pediatric treatment in the clinic too. Also inspired through fertility cases, and then you help people conceive, and then suddenly there's all kinds of kids rolling around the practice over the years, and I was having my kids too. So it's been a fun journey.
Nice work. I feel like, the more I research into everything you've accomplished and what you're offering, I get that same sense kind of in your offerings, in your programming, that you're in tune with what enables you to be your best clinician, enables you to be your best self, and you kind of work on bringing that out in patients. I see that you've developed courses, you've developed retreats, you develop programs, and like they seem to be uniquely yours. Like your signature is all over them. How have you been able to do that? How have you been able to take this kind of process where you evaluate what is going to be valuable to the most people, but also reflects what's uniquely me as a practitioner, to bring this to the masses?
I think one of the early elements was just being in the clinic. And, for all the clinicians out there, you can't help but learn by sitting with other human beings, especially one-to-one over an extended period of time. So after there's, a few hundred patients, or you start getting into the thousands of patient visits and often office visits, there's so much wisdom and learning that starts coming through just from hearing people's stories. And I ask a lot of questions, and I like asking the deep questions, and I really want to get down to the root issues. And, of course, that's such a Chinese medicine mindset, is let's get down to the source of whatever the disturbances are, either mentally, emotionally, or physically, or often all the above. And what that pointed to was myself. Where am I out of balance? Where do I need to dive into different layers of my life? And so I did counseling. I saw energy workers. I did a lot of acupuncture trades. I did herbal medicine, took all my own remedies, and really good conversations with colleagues that also wanted to go deep. And then we start questioning things. And I do think I have a natural curiosity about life. I like to understand a lot. I have that investigative mind of doing hundreds and hundreds of courses. And that was like my weekend side gig for, maybe you can relate as a practitioner. It just seems like there's so much to learn. And there's so much that is available to us. And I was often inspired and excited by my patients, especially cases where I was confused or I didn't have all the answers, or I knew I was missing something, then I would often turn to, let's learn and grow more. And what I found was kind of two pathways that I think, in your question, when I reflect, were the most helpful. One was a lot of deep dive work on myself, and then taking those extra courses, learning from other mentors, learning from other doctors that had, walked before me, seeing what their expertise was. And, maybe they've been practicing for 30 or 40 years. There's a lot to be learned, but then also bringing that back through my own lens and my own perspective and my own experience. And again, just staying curious. And the more curious I am, the deeper my understanding is, the more knowledge I can gain. And then it's not just about knowledge, it's the application of those things that I think starts to turn it into wisdom. And there's so many different examples I could use. I would say one, especially for the practitioner, well, this is for everybody, but doctors and practitioners, I would have times, maybe I was 4 or 5 years into my clinic work and pretty busy, and I'd worked a ton and just done everything I could to build a busy practice, and making myself available for long, long hours all the time, and worked, every Saturday for 6 years in a row, and lots of hours through the week, just to be present, to be available was one of my focuses. But I started diving into my own psyche, my own nervous system, my own, woundings and traumas and patterns and things like that. And as I did that, I could see it really impact my practice, in my effectiveness, how good I could listen, how I could show up, how present I could be with somebody, and the results kept getting better. And there would be times where, maybe the schedule would thin out a little bit. And as an entrepreneur, as a clinician, if you're not seeing patients, you're not making money in this line of work, or at least that was my experience. And I didn't have a salary, there's no paycheck. And so some of those times you think, oh, what's happened? How come nobody's coming to see me? I was busy and now I'm not. Like, what is that? And what I started learning is those I would take as opportunities to learn new skills, but I would often dive into myself to see what is it in me that is creating this dynamic that I'm seeing where people aren't booking in as much. And I could see every time I did that, I would address some repressed emotion or repressed anger or an old memory or wounding or things I was struggling with. And honestly, it would usually be that day or the next day, the phone would start ringing, people would book in immediately. And I started seeing the correlation, because it took me a bit to see that. Mm-hmm. But it started speeding up, and there was many occurrences where I'd have a session with, a counselor or a guide or a mentor or something to help me through something. And literally that afternoon, the schedule would go from not being full to full. And my front desk staff would say, oh man, the phone's been ringing off the hook. And in a lot of, I wouldn't tell them, yeah, I just did like a really deep healing session this morning. And so I think our role as practitioners and doctors or clinicians, guides, coaches, whatever it might be, if you don't do your own work, that will absolutely impact the work that you can offer. And I started seeing, like, anything that I wasn't willing to go through on my own, I couldn't be of service to anybody else in that arena. I couldn't teach it. I needed to live it, and it wasn't always easy, but I didn't really do any marketing. The marketing I would do was my beacon of energy of what I was putting out as a vibe. I love it. And every time I would work on that, it would change things immediately. So yeah.
Super refreshing. Oh my gosh. That is the most refreshing story I've ever heard. Because, we're nowadays, the people who ask me and are working on doing their practice building, we're talking about patient reactivation, we're talking about lead gen. We're like, what is your, place on social? What is your place here? What is your place there? To be perfectly frank with you, I find that when I do that kind of work, when I start to reflect and dive deep into what interests me and why did I get into this, and happens mostly in the downtime, then I post about it. Then I'll write a newsletter, or then I'll do this, and people will say, oh, I saw you in the YouTube video. And I said, well, I only have time to do those in January, because that's the slowest time, but I love it. You inspired me, because today I grabbed, after reviewing all of your posts, I grabbed my journal from the first day that I went to naturopathic college.
Wow.
Yeah. Like journal entry 1, and I haven't picked up this thing in years. And torture, brutal. Like just reflecting on the difference between, kind of my approach to life and my self-story, I guess. How I was communicating with even just the journal is so different from now. Just reflecting on the differences. I think can be really helpful. But you've got this method that draws people in. If someone is listening, say for example, they're a practitioner with a slow schedule right now, and they haven't done reflection, they haven't been updating their CE or their personal, done much personal self-growth, what are the kind of 1 to 3 steps that this practitioner should take to reconnect with their self, to actually improve their practice and improve their patient care?
I think something that you just touched on, and thanks for sharing that, by the way, a 10-year-old roughly or more, journey of self-growth and seeing where you're at then and where you're at now, that is a powerful thing to do, because we can grow a ton if we're showing up intentionally. And something I started doing years ago in my practice was around intention, because I started learning that my thoughts, my ideas, my intention behind whatever I would be doing, whether it's in the clinic or retreats, was really vital and really got overlooked, I think, in some of the educational aspects or even just in life and society. I didn't get taught a lot of that growing up. And so one of the things I started doing daily, every day in the practice, not just when I felt like it, was I would come in early, I would sit down, and you could take a minute to do this, or you could take 20 minutes or more, was I would ask myself that question: why am I here today? Like, why am I actually sitting in the clinic, going to see patients today? Where am I at in my journey? Am I still happy to be here? Is this inspiring to me? How can I show up and be of the highest level of service? And even on days where maybe I wasn't at my best or going through my own stuff, I could move through that and put that aside a little bit. It's like, but what am I here for in my vision or my mission? And am I in that? And really, it could be a bit different every day. Some days I would just tune in and take a breath, and it's like, I am here to create miracles in healing today. I would love to experience miracles, like for myself and others, and just super clear, super simple. And then we don't have to overthink it. And other days I might have something else that would come up of like, I'm here to really listen today. I'm here to just sit with human beings and allow them to be human, allow me to be human. And I want to hear their story. And through that, maybe there's some things I can help them with on their healing journey, and just open it up and kind of drop all the pretense and just drop any of the ego as much as possible. And we need an ego. It's not that it's unhealthy, but the more intentional, then we can guide and drive our psyches and our thoughts and ideas into a way that's really helpful, because patients feel your intention, whether they're aware of it consciously or not. And I have heard from thousands of patients that have reported to me around patient visits that weren't good in all forms of medicine. And, there's great practitioners. There's some that maybe are not in their zone of genius, let's just say it that, or they've lost the spark, or they want to maybe do something else, or they feel stuck themselves, because practitioners, like, we're still human beings. I think that's a misconception sometimes, is that we got all the answers, or we got to figure it out, or we're just robotically moving through. Is like, no, it couldn't be further from that. But the intention is key, because if somebody feels your genuine intention that you are there authentically to be of service, I have found that changes patient outcomes maybe more than anything. And it's hard to track or measure that. But when I really feel into your question, that is something that cannot be overlooked. And also, to be honest with yourself, if you don't feel genuinely inspired to be there, and again, you don't have to feel 100% amazing all the time, but if there's a deep undercurrent that you might be in the wrong space, or you're not really feeling that deep, soul connection that's part of your destiny, maybe you just need to change up a little bit, or you need a new course or some new inspiration. Maybe there's a different skill set or gifting that wants to come through you that hasn't fully expressed itself yet. Like, that could be true, and you could be feeling disheartened. So don't lose that thread. Like, follow those curiosities within, because your patients will know. And that's huge activation of energy or inspiration, that if that isn't within you, your patients will feel that, and their cells start shifting the moment they walk in your door.
Vitamin Lab revolutionizes personalized supplements, empowering health practitioners to create tailored supplement formulations that address each patient's unique needs. Bring personalized health to your practice and choose from over 200 professional-grade ingredients to create vitamin formulas that improve patient adherence and result in tangible outcomes. All ingredients are sourced from the world's most trusted suppliers, and Vitamin Lab provides hands-on support to help you formulate and launch personalization to your patients. Say hello to a new era of personalized supplement solutions. Go to getvitaminlab.com/personalized to save $100 off your first formula.
Definitely. Well, that's more than a self-growth process from you. I see that as Dr. Kevin Preston's energetic lead gen approach. I love it. You tune in every morning. It should be at the top of the sort of funnel, you may say. I'm going to put it at the top of mine. I'm quite distracted when it comes to engaging with patients. I'm always trying to do public talks. I'm trying to be here on social. I'm trying to be in clinic, talking to family and friends. And I'm at the top of that. I feel like this approach could be incredibly helpful for so many, especially, the younger docs starting out, because it can be so challenging when you come out of school and they say, oh, now the learning begins, now today's day one. And it's like, what? And then you get stuck in CE. But what you're saying is kind of a different way to frame it. And I absolutely love that. Let's talk a little bit about your programs, if you don't mind, because I think that the way that you have set them up is incredibly interesting and seems to be that incredible transformations can happen in the setting that you have created. Mm-hmm. Could we start with the foundational principles? And I may want to frame it like this. First of all, is TCM, the foundation, the principles of TCM, are they, key core concepts of the programs that you have created? And if so, how does TCM transform lives?
Yeah, the foundation of Chinese medicine, once I got learning about it, I didn't know entirely what I was getting myself into signing up for Chinese medicine school. I don't know if you felt that way about naturopathic school. Like I thought that I knew a little bit about acupuncture because I had received treatment. I had talked to people about it. That's what shifted my direction ultimately, is the results. I'm a very practical person. And I think that's something that drew me in pretty quickly, is reading about the theories and the ideas and the philosophy that, of course, you would treat everybody individually. And of course, you would try and get down to the root issue. And it just seemed like common sense. Like it just kind of hit me so squarely that it really pulled me through a lot of the other distractions in life that, oh no, I need to follow that idea. Mm-hmm. And some of these core tenets of the philosophy of Chinese medicine is balance, keeping the body in harmony. And certainly there's many, many ways to do that. But I also remember reading early on how the emotions were stored and reflected through the organ systems. And, especially the 5 main yin organs in Chinese medicine, things like the liver come up a lot these days. And that's related to anger. And the spleen is more like overthinking, excessive contemplation, busy mind. And I would say nowadays, the spleen is probably one of the most overworked, along with the liver, organ systems we have. And you mentioned it earlier too. And I feel that way myself at times, which is why I keep needing to get into nature more. There's so many different apps. There's different messaging systems. There's programs and emails and phone calls and texts and social media. And I'm so grateful for some of these tools. But it's a lot to integrate. So our spleens energetically are taking on a lot, and the mind is so busy and it becomes chaotic and overwhelmed, and suddenly the organ starts actually being impacted. So I do love using the backbone of Chinese medicine ideas and philosophy underneath a lot of what I teach. That's what I've learned. And then what I've built on top of that is a huge focus in toxicity. And I don't actually speak about it on social media that much, and I'm even questioning right now, how come I don't talk about that more? There's lots in here. But after I got out of school, I really became interested in environmental toxins, pathogens, viruses, bacteria, parasites, chemicals, all these things. I grew up on a farm. As you know, a lot of chemical use in agriculture, and more and more and more over time. And beautifully, there's, the pendulum's kind of swinging back a little bit now, and people becoming aware that that's a problem. These are things that weren't part of the conversation 5,000 years ago in Chinese medicine, but the framework and the philosophy and the idea underneath has stood the test of time and is so profoundly beautiful. And then we can start adding some of these modern breakthroughs, modern science in addition to that. And that's kind of where I think I found the way that my brain works, both the right and left hemispheres, and trying to have them harmonize in there in the middle, that I love using cutting edge technology, but it's still built on, thousands of years of the ancient medicine of all the things that were figured out already. And so grateful for all the people that came before us, dialing in acupuncture and figuring that out early on so that we could have this tremendous map of the body to help it regulate itself in a powerful way. So that's a big part of all the teachings that I do.
I love it. Can you tell me what the programs look like? I know that you have a series of different ones, including retreats, online programs, and one-to-one consulting. Can you give me a little snapshot of the group of them?
Yeah, maybe what's so relevant, I guess, in the most way right now is I have a group called the Vitality Collective, and I'm just actually wrapping up a 10-week program of another cohort. It's all online. We dive into a lot of the Chinese medicine principles that I mentioned, and it is meant to be a catalyst for people to step into their growth and their health and vitality more. But I teach them, and I want to teach people to fish, so to speak, because after the program, I want them to be able to stand on their own 2 feet as much as possible now, with bigger toolboxes, with better tools in their possession that they can apply to themselves, maybe their kids, their friends, their family, their spouses, and things like that, to really have longevity. I like playing the long game. Nothing I do is really meant to be temporary, so I love getting into those depths with a group so that everybody walks away more empowered and more understanding of their own body. Because, like many of us, unless you become a practitioner and done training, you don't always get taught a lot about the inner workings of your system, especially on the mental emotional side. So those are a lot of the things that I like bringing to the table. And then we also use pulsed electromagnetic field devices and very specific meridian protocols to help detox the body. So there's a lot of physiological elements going on, and then there's a lot of the layering of the mental emotional picture. And I like teaching about how those things fit together, because I do find that's missing in medicine at large, and maybe for a lot of functional practitioners or guys like us. We have learned some of these different layers, or if somebody has an interest in that autoimmune conditions, especially, or chronic illness, there's never a case that I've seen where the mental emotional picture hasn't been the main underlying root source of what's going on in the body. And it doesn't mean there's not things to address in the physical system, but I find the physical body is usually the last thing to manifest symptoms. It starts way before that. And so we get to unpack all those layers in that program, and everybody gets some gear to use. We mail out the tools, and then I teach them how to use them, and then they get to go through lots of layers of pretty profound detox and huge breakthroughs, and on all those levels too, not just an organ network. And so there's the teaching, there's the treatments, and then there's the community aspect is powerful too, where we can walk together through some pretty deep material. Some challenging things may come up for individuals because we're not playing on the surface. We're going deep, and it's like if you want to get a good water source, you got to dig a deep well, and that is the aim of that program specifically. So maybe I'll just pause for a moment if you have any thoughts or questions there.
I love it. Okay, so I have some more practical questions, but then also some rather deeper questions. Let's start with the deeper one, because I noticed that on your website, you sometimes present your programs as challenges. One of them even has a disclaimer about the challenge that they may be undertaking. It's kind of like a warning. I love that. Can you tell me about how practitioners should challenge and or engage patients in this way, or if this maybe is a tool to find your ideal patient? How has this kind of approach impacted your practice, if so?
Maybe one of the first things that comes to mind is around victim consciousness. And, for many people out there, we're human. I think all of us can get pulled into that at times. I know I have, and that still happens for me, maybe just less than in the past, especially when things are coming up that are difficult, or they are challenging, or life is not going the way you want. It can be pretty easy to get pulled into that negative framework or the victim consciousness of life is happening to you versus life is happening for you. And that is something that I like to address fairly early on in treatment, because I've noticed the outcomes of the patients that don't have a victim mindset, they get better way faster. And if that victim mindset is there, it can keep people stuck. And in some cases, it seems like it doesn't matter what I do, how adept my herbal skills are, or my detox skills, or my assessment skills. If they're stuck in that paradigm up here in their heads, they can sabotage their own treatments. They don't maybe take instruction as well. They don't remember to take their remedies. Interestingly, I forgot it. I missed it for a bunch of days. And there has been times, this is early learning as a practitioner, where patients would come back and they weren't getting the results that we wanted. So then I would go to my investigative, mindset and ask questions. What about this? What about that? Am I missing something? Because I just want to be of service. And in some cases, if they would admit it, they would say, I mean, I've been drinking a little bit. I'm like, okay, that's fine. But what does a little bit mean? And then in some of those circumstances, I found out they're drinking a bottle of wine every night and more on the weekends. And then coming back to me saying, your medicine isn't working, Kevin. Those herbal tinctures you gave me are not doing it. And first of all, I was like, are you taking them? And in some cases, we have to hold people accountable and ourselves, because I'm holding myself accountable to be present and do the best job that I can. And it's not always going to be perfect, but I have enough humility to ask questions or see like, oh yeah, I think that was probably not the right formula for you. Thanks for the feedback. Let's tweak, because it's a team sport. We're on the same team. But in cases where I would do the underlying deeper questions and find out that they're maybe having some issues with alcoholism or whatever, but they weren't disclosing that, and then bringing the blame back to me of like, you're not fixing me. Meanwhile, they might be eating McDonald's and drinking a huge amount. I have compassion for that, but I'm also not going to let that fly of, you have to take some responsibility. Let's meet that head on in a beautiful way, in a kind way, but a clear and truthful way. Because I think in some cases I was rose-colored glasses, would give everybody the benefit of the doubts, but then when that would come back around, I actually found that sometimes I was doing a disservice to my clients by giving them too much slack, or by giving them like too much leeway to not actually have things that were going to help them. And then I could authentically bring it forward and say, hey, listen, you said you wanted to heal. You said you wanted help with this stuff. I'm here helping you. But I see that your actions are not necessarily lining up with what you said. So either what you said is not actually accurate or correct, or there's some kind of disconnect or miscommunication going on about the way that you can be successful in your own life and healing. Don't do it for me, do it for you. And so a lot of it was coming back to self-responsibility, that I started realizing that I couldn't heal anybody, and that I couldn't take more responsibility for them than they were willing to take for themselves. And I found that it was actually more of a loving and clear way to practice, because I got better results. And honestly too, if somebody didn't want to do deeper work, that's okay completely. But then I might not be the practitioner for you, because I'm only interested in going deep and bringing everything that I have to the table. And if somebody's only willing to engage in 5 or 8 or 10% of what's available with me, then they should find somebody else. It's not a match. And I actually coach patients on that it might not be a match. We'll have a visit. That's okay. I'm at the point, I don't take it personally. I used to, I put my self-worth on how much patients liked me, or if they would rebook, completely, or if I got all the success.
Same.
And if I couldn't heal something, total failure, or, I didn't show up perfectly. But now it's not about that. It's more, how can I be of service? And the best thing that I could do, if we're not a match, is to refer you to somebody else, or encourage you to find somebody where you do feel that resonance, because not everybody has to love what I'm sharing, and that's okay too. So for practitioners, give yourself permission to not need to treat everybody.
Definitely. It's a really good response. It brings up so many things for me. One of the things it brings up is the desire for myself and tons of the practitioners I've spoken with on this show to create their own programs where there is some routine check-in that's built into the program, so that you can have more opportunity for personalization, individualization in your care. Because we're doing this individualization around follow-ups, but when you have a program where people have to show up, when they do show up, you can do the work that you're describing. Whereas if you leave it open for follow-up, or if, for example, you choose the wrong interval for them, maybe too long or even too short, to be honest, then you're not, I don't want to say hand-holding, because so much on the muscle building side and the VO2 max enhancement side, I want to have my own program. I wish I had a fitness facility right here beside me where I could hold hands and take people through. But there's a bit of that in the sense that you're challenging someone, but you're asking them like, okay, you got to show up for the challenge.
Yeah.
And so many are trying to do that, but you've actually done it. You've created this collective, and I'm interested in this kind of program that you've created. How often do you meet?
So the program I've got right now, we're meeting once a week. It's every Tuesday evening. We hop on Zoom. It's usually an hour to an hour and a half. If I'm being honest, it's always an hour and a half. But there's so much that can come up.
Let's face it, it's 3 hours.
I joke with my cohort this time too. I was like, hey, I'm going to try and make this an hour, but then we all chuckle about the reality of that probably won't happen. And one of the reasons is I do want to be of service. The things that people share can land really deeply. And often a lot of people are going through things in the group that need some care and need some attention. And to be able to have space held for those transformations to happen is something that can be really, really powerful. And so Yeah, this last one, we're just wrapping up. Tomorrow's the last version of this one. Yeah, 10 weeks, once a week. And then I give homework. I give questions to contemplate. We usually do a bit of a meditation or process on most calls. And I'll just kind of feel into it with each one. There's a bit of a theme. We start off with some of the more basic layers around the lymphatics and the liver and the kidneys and working on detoxing and giving them tools and support for that. And then that leads us into the deeper work. And then we start getting more into the emotional aspects, the connection with the organs, seeing what wants to come up. Because as we're detoxing, the physiology, the emotion and things that have been stored, time capsules of, traumas that haven't been integrated fully, or where there's another layer that's ready for healing, those will start coming up. And then I also have a Telegram chat for this group specifically that they can share, they can ask questions. I'll chime in on that through the week, kind of in between, so that there's consistency and continuity of care. And then some things I say, hey, actually, we'll bring that up on the call because this will benefit everybody. And then what are the themes that are coming up? So we usually look at the body, we look at the mind, and then depending on what's happened that week, it usually leads to an inspired, a meditation, I guess, or guided journey or process to be able to unlock that for everybody. And it's always fascinating. Every group is different. And I probably am going to run another group or two of that. We are looking to build that into a course that's going to be available all the time, because I've ran it a few times now. So we've got really great learning, because we learn every time. How can we do it better? How can we get better outcomes? And, really at the end of the day, I am a results focused person. That's what I'm here for. I want to see the breakthroughs and the healing. And that's the most inspiring to me. And that like human potential where you see somebody get activated in a beautiful way and they unlock old patterns and old blockages, and suddenly their physical issues start, dissolving, and they feel different, and their creative brain comes back online. Their heart opens again. Oh, it's just, it's very satisfying. We'll say that. Yeah.
I bet, and you're having so many patient contacts every week for 10 weeks is awesome. So you're on the journey there with them. I want to just take a quick detour around two different interventions that you've mentioned. The first one may be quicker because it might be quite cut and dry. Let's find out. But you're like the third person in a row to mention PEMF on the show. It seems to be really taking off in our community. And but you had a secondary approach that was included with it. Can you tell me about the step-by-step process or the tools that you're kind of integrating together?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I've been working in frequency medicine for most of my career. As soon as I got out of school, I got into meridian testing and homotoxicology and homeopathy, and then again studying toxins of the body and the things we get exposed to as human beings. And I could really see over time the correlation between that and chronic illness, and that we couldn't ignore these things anymore. And life is very different now on the planet, compared to 100 years ago, 200 years ago. Plastic hadn't been invented, or, things like Roundup and all these other toxins that are a regular part of human living now. And so I don't like skipping over the fine details. And so using devices or using tools that can kind of cut through the noise and the static in the physiology and down to the cell level are always things that I've been interested in. And so again, it comes down to results. And so I've used homeopathy in a lot of ways and different frequency-based remedies that you're matching frequency in the body. And, for people that maybe don't understand that language, I think, it's like a radio tuner. There's different radio stations. Each, 92.1, 92.2, and 3, and so on are going to give you slightly different information, different radio station or whatever it is. So our bodies work on those principles. Like, we are light beings. We are electromagnetic batteries walking around, and we produce a lot of voltage, which led me to the study of voltage in the body. And I could start to see the meridian network as this voltage regulation communication superhighway that even from an acupuncture point of view, if you adjusted that network properly, somebody would have miraculous healing happen. So you'd have to find those areas of like stuck voltage, blocked voltage, energy flow. People talk about chi. That's vital force. And a lot of the vital force in our body is electrical before it's chemical. So rather than intervening from a chemical point of view, I wanted to intervene in a helpful way at the electrical or energetic level of the body, because that would change the downstream chemistry. So I've taught about this quite a bit over the last couple of years, that, conventionally people are often trying to push the chemistry back uphill. but it doesn't really work that way in the body. It's electrical before chemistry. So if you adjust the voltage, or you know how to adjust those changes in the body, the system will shift, and it does start building different hormones. It does start building different neurotransmitters rather than trying to go backwards. And I believe the Chinese medicine philosophy had kind of figured it out. They just didn't use that language, 3,000 years ago. So I've been trying to look at how I can adapt language around those principles that still work, but bring it into our modern times. And then looking at devices like PEMF and how close it is to the human physiology. Like, our bodies pulse electromagnetic fields every day, all the time. The heart is a good example. The brain, the nervous system, it is pulsing electricity all the time. So if we have devices and tools to be able to assist that, or bring it back into balance, bring it back into harmony, oh yeah, the health of the body and the cells can change in a really big way. And so we've used that in the Vitality Collective as a delivery mechanism so that pulse can get through the body. But then we've also used a company called Biofield Data. My colleague and I worked together for a decade, seeing so many patients, thousands and thousands and thousands of visits, of gathering data through meridian testing, actually, about all of the underlying patterns that would lead to different illnesses, or that would have a tendency to lead to imbalances in the system. And over time, reverse engineering all those deeper, bacteria or mold or toxins or whatever. And you could start to see, when I treated that stuff, people would get better. And so that's now been synthesized into meridian protocols for pretty much every main meridian in the body. And his name is Todd, and he went on to develop this based on years and years and years of data gathering of, here's the regular patterns. And can that be synthesized into a format that is going to be generally effective for almost anybody if you're guiding and directing that properly? And so having that data inside those meridian protocols, and then using the PEMF device to deliver that information into the system. So I know that sounds a little bit complicated, but basically there's the emitter, there's the antenna of the pulsed field, and then we're putting data in front of that, and then that data gets to go into the body, and it works beautifully because of the information that has been built on.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, it's brought you to this incredible point where you're able to help so many people using this tool. That may be part of the response to my second question, to my follow-up question about intervention, because you've mentioned detox a few times. I'm wondering if you could share, I know that it's likely different for each of the potential exposures, environmental toxin versus microbe. But can you tell me a little bit about nutrient formula, nutrition approach, interventions that you may use in your detox protocols?
Mm-hmm. Something I've also learned along the way is that less is more. Mm-hmm. And what I started finding, especially in chronic illness, that they didn't necessarily need to have a lot of things added. They needed things to be subtracted. They needed things to get pulled out of the system. And again, going back to nature, like, the inherent intelligence of our physiology is unbelievable. Like, the body's ability to heal itself is absolutely spectacular, but it does need the right resources, and it needs the right time and guidance sometimes, especially if it's gotten off track, especially like autoimmune conditions. But I never believed, we'll talk about autoimmunity as an example. I never believed that it was because the body made a mistake. Nature doesn't make mistakes, in my view. Could be wrong. That's my current understanding. And that if nature is choosing to do something, there's a reason for it. So I've worked with farmers, and I love learning about soil and plants and things. And there's farmers that I have locally here that, depending on the weeds that grow in the field, they know what mineral or nutrient deficiency is there just based on what showed up.
Wow.
Whereas the conventional side of thinking is like, there's weeds, you got to spray that. And essentially you're just poisoning the soil, and you're disrupting the ecosystem of the soil further, which just continues to propagate the issue. So the body is the same, because we are made of soil. We're earthly beings too. We have all the same minerals in our bodies as the soil has. And so if I started looking at it that way, I could start to see, what has gotten in the way of the natural, regular biological function of the body. And if there is something in the way, let's get that out of there. It's like having a thorn stuck in your hand, or, grizzly bear's walking around. It's got a big thorn in between its, feet, in between its toes. it's going to be impacted by that. And it may not be fully impactful, but it'll still cause an issue. What if there's 5 or 10 thorns in there in each foot? Now you're starting to see real impact. And so I started seeing toxins that way. What if people had too many chemicals or mold exposure or different bacterial, like residual long-term infections? That starts to accumulate. So we need to start taking things out so that they can actually take nutrients in. And that was a pattern I started seeing more so is before I start adding from a nutrient point of view, can they even take it in? Can they absorb what I want to give them? And a lot of cases they couldn't because their body was so off track. So then we started rewinding. Let's start clearing space. And I would say this is true of life in all forms, or I've experienced this. If I want to bring in something new into my life, I got to simplify or clear space. If I have too much clutter mentally, emotionally, physically, there's no room for anything to come in. And that is actually, belief structures as well. If we have limiting beliefs about ourselves, we can't take on beliefs of abundance or health or vitality if it's kind of consumed by all these other thoughts about how we see ourselves every day. So I know that might be a little bit of a, diversion away from the nutrient, but that's kind of the first step. And one of the ways we do that in the Vitality Collective, and actually for all my patients, typically, the things I've seen have changed in medicine. And I've been in practice for over 16 years now. And the level of care required for the lymphatic system, the liver, and the kidneys is way more than what it used to be because of the amount of toxicity. Our bodies are taking on new stimulus, new material, stuff that the human body's never seen before, that if you don't get those detox pathways open, you could do a parasite cleanse or try and tackle like SIBO or other things in the system. But if your pathways can't actually carry out the job, it's like showing up to a workplace without a hammer and you're like, hey, build me a house. And like, I'm here, but I can't really get a lot done today. So over many, many thousands of patient visits, I started seeing that I got to start there with pretty much everybody. And then you build the foundation and then you pave the way for getting to some of the deeper material. And then I find results last, instead of just having an impact when they're on a formula, but as soon as they're off again, they come back to where they were. I don't see that as successful long-term. So how can we get deeper and unwind the system more?
I love it. Yeah. Well, I'm laughing because I was talking with one of the representatives, a physician, from one of the labs when I was discussing this toxicity lab that I had the other day. And they gave me the same answer. They're like, don't do anything until you're able to remove the stimulus or the toxin, because even if you get results, it's not going to be lasting, and it can be kind of confusing to the patient in front of you. So can we go through a bit of this removal process? There's enough to say investigate your place for mold, which is what happens in Vancouver pretty much with everybody.
Yep.
Stop eating or try to avoid the microplastics. But I don't have a solid strategy. Can you give me you could pick a lane. Mm-hmm. Can you give me a strategy for trying to communicate this avoidance of environmental toxin to my patients?
Mm-hmm. Well, I look at it as the body is a big filter mechanism. We take things in, we take things out. A lot of doctors in the past, maybe more conventional thought, is that you don't need to detox. We don't need to do that. Our organs are built for that. It works well. There's no need to do a liver cleanse or any of that kind of stuff. And early on in my career, I was kind of curious about that. I'm like, yeah, the body is built to do this. Why do we need to detox more? But then I started seeing patients. And then I started seeing the overwhelming load of toxins that they'd been exposed to. And even when I looked at my own life, and then I, would see patients, especially farmers. We'll just use farmers as an example. I'm so grateful for growing the food for us. But they've also, in many cases, been conditioned, or the industry has really been chemical heavy. And if you break down any of those chemicals, they're incredibly toxic to the body. And then when I would talk to some of the farmers I was seeing that were having deep issues of chronic inflammation and a lot of symptoms coming up, I would say, yeah, so you're a farmer. Yep. How long? 35 years. I'm like, your dad was too? Yep. Your grandfather? Yep. Do you guys use a lot of chemical? And they're like, oh yeah, you're out in the shop. And I'm like, do you do the spraying and the mixing? Yep. Do you wear a mask? Do you wear gloves? And in the old days, no, they didn't. So some of these toxins and chemicals are being passed on generationally through the embryo development, depending on who's exposed. And I remember, and no fault to my parents, like we just didn't know. I was walking around spraying Roundup in the yard, spraying weeds, just doing what I was told because it was told that it was fine. The reps and the ag reps and things would go around, oh no, this stuff is fine. It just kind of dissipates in the environment. And that's such BS, as we've learned now. It's a big problem. Completely. So if you have a vessel in this human body that we're walking around in, and you keep adding toxins, as long as the liver and the kidneys and the lymphatic tissue are full strength, full capacity, and our GI system is perfect and everything is great, you will detox a lot of that material. You may not detox all of it, but you'll detox a lot. But what happens when those filters start to get run down? You get fatigued, you get sick a few times, you start overworking, you're under a huge amount of stress. Those filter systems do not clear properly anymore. And what happens then? More toxins accumulate in that filter. Pretty soon that filter is super clogged up and people don't feel well and all kinds of symptoms start showing up. Of course, we have to look at those places in the body. So I usually just tell patients, hey, your cup's full. And if your cup's full, it doesn't take much at all to add to your cup before your body has a big reaction, like inflammation, like autoimmune conditions. Your body's not stupid. Your system is speaking to you and it is telling you the truth. The body can't lie. So whatever the symptom has to communicate to you, that's always up for debate as practitioners, why we do the training to determine what is that about? And if we pull that thread, what are we going to find at the bottom? Because the symptom doesn't always tell you what's actually going on underneath, but it alerts you that you need to start being curious and listening and looking. And most of what I see nowadays is people's cups are too full. They're full from an overwork point of view and a stress point of view, too much stimulus, and too many physical toxins through food, through clothing, through water, through air. And to me, it's just common sense. You can't add so many poisons and toxins to an ecosystem of the body and expect it to just be fine indefinitely. That to me is not even logical anymore, because you couldn't do that to, if you had fish in a fish tank, how many chemicals or toxins could you add to that water before all the fish would die?
That's a good analogy.
It happens really quickly with fish, especially guppies. My kids love fish. They got these things and they've learned the chemistry and the environment of that water is so important. But for some reason, there's been a real issue in our society of crossing that bridge mentally to that applies to us too. Right. Not just animals, not just your fish in the fish tank. We are a fish in a global fish tank, and our physiology is being impacted by the environment 100%.
Completely. Oh, that's very well said. I really appreciate the way that you frame that. I think a lot of people talk about, exercise being the number one thing for optimal wellness for people. And part of me lately, in the last kind of 6 months or so, I've been feeling maybe one of the largest benefits of exercise is actually the detoxification that occurs when you're sweating, when you're pumping your blood, when your heart rate goes up, for example, when you're forcing mitochondrial function. Right? I just think that there's likely something else about this that is related and very relevant to what you're describing. I really appreciate that. I think you're so far ahead, and I absolutely love that. But one of the things you're doing is really inspiring me, and this is a whole retreat setup that you're doing. This next thing you're doing, I see that it's in May, I think 2025. Is that true?
Yeah, we've got a few things coming up. Happy to speak about those.
Incredibly. Tell me about Iceland.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I could talk about Iceland all day. Part of the work, and I'll try and bridge this together, the one-to-one patient visits have always been deeply inspiring. And one of my curiosities years ago was if I could get a powerful change or transformation in an hour visit with somebody, what if I had them for a few hours? Or what if we could be in proximity for a day or two? And that's when I started looking into doing retreats and started leading retreats back in 2019. First one we did, it was a dear friend of mine, Emily, in Banff, Alberta. And we had a beautiful small group of people, and it was called Awaken Your Superhuman. And I loved it. And the transformations and the shifts that happened, because we were there for it was 5 days, I think, together. And it was so powerful. And I was like, okay, there is something to this. I got to be out of the clinic. I love being in the mountains. I love taking groups out into the forest, but then we would do processes. We'd ask questions, and then we'd come back to the hotel and we'd maybe do some group work and some breath work, and I'd do some acupuncture or whatever it might be. And I would just find that immersion created huge changes, because they weren't going back to work after their office visit with me. They were they're going back to their room to integrate, and then we were going to meet up and do some more work together and dive in even more. So that sustained effort over several days, I started to notice in many of the retreats I've led since then, magic starts happening after like the 36-hour mark. Like it starts happening right off the bat, but something changes in the nervous system because somebody's had enough time away from their daily life, away from their messy house or their boss at work they don't like, to really just have enough time to go deeply inward for themselves and be guided and supported and really cared for, and a safe environment to be able to heal in, like a cocoon in some way energetically, that their body would start shifting fast. And 10 years of therapy would equivalent like happen in a weekend. And I'm not just saying that. I have had patients or retreat guests that have said that, hey, that was 2.5 days. I feel like I got 10 years of therapy. And stuff that I've been working on that I haven't been able to break through has broken through. What's going on? And so that just inspired me to create more and do more. And so that's kind of where the idea for Iceland came from. Is number one, I love Iceland. I've been there. It was 9 years ago I was there. I love the raw beauty of that rugged terrain. It really speaks to me. I love getting, in that volcanic sort of geothermal energy, hot springs, waterfalls, ice, glaciers, and all the rest. That I had this vision come up over the last couple of years, and was just waiting for the right time to really utilize the raw, rugged terrain to be able to go very deeply and vulnerably into like a deep container of work. So I've got 8 people I'm taking. We did an application process. I interviewed all of them. There's people I said no to just because the energy is probably the most important thing to me. And it's not always a personal thing at all. It's more what would be the highest dynamics for the group of everybody that's there. Are these people interested in growth? Do they want to be challenged in a loving way to get down to those really deep aspects that maybe they haven't got to yet? What wants to be lit up in them for the next leg of their journey? It's a lot of practitioner type people that often do these things with me, of course. And then that can affect the course of their career, their destiny. And there is a saying in Chinese medicine, it's called nourishing your destiny. And that was actually the title of a talk that I gave in a speaking gig I had a couple months ago. And I love that concept. And if I can have a few days, in this case, we're doing 7 nights in Iceland together. We're going to be, hitting all the main places to be able to use that as a backdrop to do the deepest work inside. And so it's something that, obviously I'm very passionate about because of the healing that happens.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Oh my God, sorry. That's so exciting. I got excited and I threw my keyboard. That sounds really fun. Oh my goodness. That sounds so cool. What an opportunity for transformation for the people who have signed up. I'm really excited for it. And I want to learn more about it at a later date. We should definitely do a round 2 because I am so interested in everything that you're doing. I couldn't get to most of my questions. So this is good, sir. This is good. If people are looking to learn more about you, Dr. Preston, where should they go?
I would say, website and Instagram is just Dr. Kevin Preston. So Dr. Kevin Preston on Instagram. That's where you'll see most of the things that we're up to. We've got an event that we do every year called The New Human. That's coming in October 2025 as well. And we've got some amazing speakers coming in. Last year we had Zach Bush. Nice. Charles Eisenstein, a bunch of other beautiful friends that I have that were delivering some really deep work as well. And it's like a big soul family gathering for anybody that wants to go to the next level. It's pretty unique. And my website, drkevinpreston.com. And then we also have 4 events like that. It's called newhumanevents.com. And so that's a way to find me.
Awesome. Okay, I will definitely check it out. Thank you so much for your time, sir. I really appreciate it, and I'm sure that we'll talk again soon.
Oh, thanks so much for having me on. I love having practitioner conversations, clinicians and things, because there's such a depth of understanding that you gain just with supporting people. And health is, I think, one of the more key places of life to focus on. And so I always feel it's very a privileged role and an honor to be able to hold space for people in that way. And again, not for the faint-hearted necessarily, because it's a really important place, when you're working with people's health. So it's very sacred to me. And thanks for doing the work that you do as well. And excited to keep learning. Thanks. Well, I've learned a lot from you, and I look forward to continue learning from you. So thanks again, Dr. Preston. We'll talk again soon. All right. Sounds good.
Thanks for joining us for today's discussion. What about today's podcast resonated with you? Be sure to tag at Dr. David Dizer and at Get Vitamin Lab. If you're learning from and enjoying this podcast, please let us know by subscribing to our YouTube channel and follow the show on Spotify and Apple. And don't forget to leave us a review. It's the best way to support our podcast, and it helps others find us. To learn more or book a demo to explore what personalization could do for your practice, please go to www.getvitaminlab.com/personalized.